Everyone, it's Chelsea from Little Mountain Ranch, and it is way colder out here today than it was the other day. There seems to be a cold front moving through all over the place. We are not getting hit nearly as hard as the people on the East Coast or the people in the Midwest who are getting down to minus 50 degrees, which is just insane. We're actually only, I think it's probably around minus 15 or so right now. That's Celsius, so it's not that cold. What I wanted to do today was to implement some of the awesome suggestions that I received on my pantry video, where I showed some of the, I guess you would call them fails, that I've had this year as far as my food storage. I can't thank you guys enough for all of the suggestions that you gave me, because there were some things that I read and I went, duh, of course, that makes perfect sense. I'll link that video up here if you wanted to go and check it out. But so there were sort of two main issues that I was having. One was with mold on my root vegetables, and the second was with extreme musty taste and flavor on my apples. What I'm going to try to do is to implement a bunch of the suggestions that you guys made and see if it makes any difference. We only have a couple months left in the root cellar season where I'm going to have food actually stored down here. A couple of the suggestions were just obvious ones, and I just went, of course, why not? Why didn't I think of that? One of the things I commented in that video was that the bin that was in the middle of my bins of root vegetables, so my beets and my rutabagas, was moldy, but the ones on the outside weren't. So Shanita Garcia, thank you Shanita for this piece of advice, pointed out that the mold that was happening on the bins that were on the inside of my row. So she pointed out quite obviously, and I went, duh, of course, that the bins on the inside weren't getting as much air circulation as the ones on the outside. So what I'm going to do is actually space out the bins a little bit so that there can get more airflow. And then one of the other things that I'm going to do with the root vegetables in particular is to get them up off the ground. Joe Scott, who offered so much really great advice, pointed out that within a root cellar like this, because it's an earthen root cellar, I'm dealing with spores and bacteria and things like that I'm not going to be able to do anything about because it is the earth. And that's just part of this type of root cellar. It's just one of the challenges of having a root cellar like this rather than, say, a concrete one. So he suggested getting everything up off the ground. And again, this just seems so obvious, and I don't know why I didn't think of it. So what I've done is I've brought in a pallet and I'm going to lift everything up off the ground. And then one of the third things that I'm going to do for this particular mold problem is to bring in some essential oils. Susan from Heartfelt Heirloom Farm, hi Susan, suggested that maybe to both combat my mold problem and also my moisture problem was to put a couple of buckets of water in here with essential oils in them. But I'm going to add to that a little bit and actually use some essential oils in a spray bottle and spray them on the ground below the palette that I'm going to be using. And the essential oils that I've chosen to use after doing some research are oregano and tea tree oil. One of the best oils to use is actually cinnamon bark oil, but I don't currently have that, so I'm going to be using the tea tree and the oregano. That's going to be what I'm going to do to try to help with my mold problem. And if you'll remember, oh, it's cold, oh my goodness. If you'll remember, I mentioned my apple issue with the mustiness with my apples, and I received quite a few really great suggestions about that I'll implement as well, but I'm going to have to work fast because I'm freezing and I don't want to drop the temperature in here too much. Okay, so for the extra humidity that I want to have in here, it's still a bit dry, is to add, I just have a mason jar and I'm just gonna add some essential oils, about 10 drops or so into this, and put that just on the ground towards the back and see if that helps. And I'm gonna just mark on the side of this just because I'm curious to see in a couple of weeks how much of the water actually is out of this jar by the end of that. And that's just more just for my curiosity than anything else. I'm pretty sure that this is going to make a really big difference on the mold problem with these vegetables, so I'm feeling super encouraged. One of the challenges of being a modern homesteader is that, at least in my case, I'm not connected to anybody who has lived this kind of lifestyle before. So thankfully there's YouTube and books and things like that to be able to get information, but there's just no substitute for actual experience. There's so many things that I just go, oh man, that's just so obvious. I should have thought of that. But that's all part of the process. And it's actually one of the things that I like about this lifestyle the most is the fact that it's just, I'm always learning. There's always something new to learn. And there's so many really cool kind of common sense and practical ways of doing things that aren't super complicated and don't cost a lot of money, because back during the times when this lifestyle was the way that most people lived, there just wasn't a lot of money. So people were full of ingenuity and great ideas, and they just made things work with what they had. One of the many things I love about this kind of lifestyle. Man, whew. So my second problem that I was dealing with this root cellar was my issue with mustiness with my apples. Root cellars like this have a really strong musty smell, particularly if they're old like this one is. This root cellar was originally dug here in, we think, around the 1920s. And of course, there were adaptations made to it. Part of the wall on the back side here is actually concrete. Part of the entrance area here is concrete. But the hole itself has been used here for a long time. So it's pretty musty smelling. And I bought a bunch of apples in the fall, and they were edible, but barely, as far as how strong the musty smell was. So I pointed that out in my video, and I received several really great solutions or suggestions to solve this problem. Northern Prepsteader suggested boxes of charcoal down here. I'm going to have to go on a hunt for some charcoal around my property, because there wasn't any when I went around this morning that was just kind of obvious that I could grab, but that is going to be something I'm going to try, because why not? Joe Scott and the Northern Maine Homestead suggested using damp sawdust, because apparently that helps to absorb that musty kind of smell before it gets to the apples. And Marvin, who's a really good friend of my husband's, and is actually a third generation rancher in our area, so has lots of experience, just practical experience with this kind of life, suggested having them in like a wooden cupboard or a wooden crate or something like that, because the wood itself helps to absorb that musty smell. And this is what they used to do in the old days. And after those suggestions were made, and I thought about how many different pictures I've seen of old root cellars, there would be wooden crates with either sawdust and even sometimes straw in them that had vegetables and fruit in them. I'm just going to use a cardboard box and put the apples in just like I did before. And because I don't have any sawdust available right now, all my sawdust is under a mountain of snow, one of the other suggestions that came in was to use newspaper. And that's something I've actually done before when I was storing my apples in a crawl space in one of my older houses. So I just got some newsprint, and I'm going to wrap the apples up in newsprint and put them in the wooden crate and see if that helps at all. And I'm just going to leave them down here for the next 2 weeks, and then we'll come in and do a taste test in about 2 weeks and see how they do. So here is the wooden box that I'm going to use. And I'm not going to put a lid on these, but I will put just a piece of paper flat over the top of it, because I still think they need to have the air circulation and the ability to let off the gases that they're going to be releasing. And just for the fun of it, I got some green apples as well, just to see if there's any difference between the green apples and the red apples. So I'll put a couple of them in the open cardboard box. I'm also going to put these apple bins up off the ground, and that's just going to be a practice from now on, because that just makes sense. Here's the bins up off the ground. The ground has been sprayed with oregano and tea tree oil. In behind here, I have my jar of water that also has oregano oil in it. And then my wooden crate with the apples that are wrapped in newsprint. And then just a box of a couple of apples over here. Whew, holy mackerel, it's freezing. My heart goes out to all of you in the Midwest and on the East Coast. Even by Canadian standards, -50 is freezing cold. I'm cold enough at -15, so I'm gonna head in the house now. I'm going to make some coleslaw for lunch. This is a cabbage out of this root cellar. This is after 4 months, for those of you that missed the last video. The cabbages are still doing fantastic. And even now, a week later, after I checked them the last time, there's absolutely no change in them. So I'm hoping I can make them through the whole winter. That would be amazing. I will film another video in a couple of weeks and give you an update on all of these changes that I've made in here, and to see how much of a difference it's made. But I have a really good feeling it's going to make a big difference, especially just getting everything off on the ground. That just, I mean, I don't know why I didn't think of that. Anyway, I hope you have a great couple of days until I see you again, everyone, and I hope you're staying warm. Bye.